What if the key to making better decisions in business and in life lies not in logic, but in tapping into Icelandic wisdom?
We need good intuition to reason well. And without intuition, there wouldn't be much innovation.
How do you define intuition?
It's an effective way to use unconscious information to make better decisions and actions.
Have you ever wondered how to navigate uncertainty and make choices that align with your deeper wisdom? This episode is for you.
This really transformed the way I thought about work, life, career, and what I wanted to do with life and how I showed up.
How have you seen intuition influence long-term success of a business or an individual?
One of the most effective ways, whether you look at martial arts or business strategy throughout history, is the power of presence.
How do we take back ownership and agency of our attention so that we could tune more into our intuition?
One of the most important things that we do to take ownership over our own attention and therefore our intuition is to
Welcome back, Kwik Brains. I am your host and your brain coach, Jim Kwik. Today, we will learn about the Icelandic art of intuition, otherwise known as Insaei. I believe it means the sea within, and how aligning with it will help you to make better informed decisions and welcome creativity back into your life. Our guest, Hrund Gunnsteinsdottir, brings a very unique perspective on how we lead and learn and live and innovate and really make better decisions in time of uncertainty. When we're in transition, when there's lots of noise, she draws on her experience having leading roles in the areas of development and post-conflict resolution and reconstruction with the UN in Europe and Asia, innovation, investments, sustainable and circular business transition, and the arts and education. So this is going to be a great episode. I encourage you, if you can, to take some notes. She was the first woman to chair Iceland's large public innovation fund. She was the managing director of Iceland's Sustainability Center program, land designed and directed diploma university program recognized by Nordic Council for best responding to 21st century workplace challenges. Welcome to the show, Hrund.
Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure and an honor to be here with you, Jim.
So this is a topic, we've done well over 400 episodes. We haven't really gone into this. Maybe we could start with Insaei. As this is the Icelandic word for intuition. You know, for me, intuition is a form of intelligence. We don't hear about it a lot. You know, usually hear about verbal linguistic or mathematical. Wondering maybe we could start with, how do you define intuition? I'm sure there's many different ways.
Yeah, well, thank you. And thank you for framing it this way. So intuition is it's not exactly something that we learn at school or is like hyped in our societies or cultures. There are, as you say, so many different ways of defining, or we have defined intuition in different ways in the past. And partly we continue to do that. And so my kind of exploration into the world, this magnificent world within us of intuition, which I started over 20 years ago. And when I started to do my research and converse with people from all over the world, in different languages, I realized that we have so many different angles to explore this concept. So like on the opposite extremes, we have this definition that intuition is an irrational impulse we shouldn't rely on, over to being something woo-woo that hasn't been backed by science. And then in between, I would see all these amazing rigorous research that shows how fundamental intuition is to our intelligence. You know, things like, we need good intuition to reason well. And without intuition, there wouldn't be much innovation. So one of the ways that we could define intuition today, which I'm quite happy with, is a definition I take from a neuroscientist called Joel Pearson from Australia, I believe. And he says intuition is an effective way to use unconscious information to make better decisions and actions. So it takes us beyond the we know without knowing, because I don't think that quite covers it, the knowing without knowing. But what I discovered in my kind of research and bringing together all these different cultures and knowledge, schools of thought and knowledge spaces from spiritualism, science, business, philosophy, all these different strands of thought, was that I kind of landed in back in my home yard, in my roots, the Icelandic language, and discovered, I kind of saw the Icelandic word for intuition with fresh eyes. And the word is Insaei. And the way that I've used it with my colleague, Kristín Ólafsdóttir, who did the film with me on Insaei and in an education program and now in my book, is to open up the word Insaei, because it's made up of two things, in and sae. In means inside or into, and sae means the sea or to see. So the concept of Insaei helps us understand what intuition is, how to hone and harness it, and how to navigate by it as an inner compass. So the threefold meaning of Insaei is the sea within, implying the ever-flowing, constantly changing unconsciousness that we have. And then secondly, it means to see within, which means to know yourself well enough to be able to put yourself into other people's shoes, to be able to discern intuition from biases and fears and wishful thinking. And then thirdly, Insaei means to see from the inside out, which means that you are navigating the ocean of life and the turbulent world we live in with a strong inner compass.
That's a wonderful description. When I was reading an advanced copy of your book, Insaei, it says heal, revive, and reset with the Icelandic art of intuition. I'm curious, how has it shaped your life personally?
Well, it shaped my life a lot, Jim. I guess when I look back to my childhood, it was always there, but we never named it. Just being in a state of flow and being creative and stuff like that. I think many of us can relate to that in our childhood. When I was a young adult in my late 20s, I was in a great hurry to climb the so-called career ladder. I was only 27 when I was in a position of leading one of the UN agencies in post-conflict reconstruction after the war in Kosovo. And it was a period in my life where I was learning a lot. My learning curve was very steep. It was one of the most generous years I've experienced, but also one of the hardest years. And during this time, I would use my intuition a lot and obviously my knowledge, but I was very bad at applying my intuition when it came to me, my personal life. So I had no idea how to set my boundaries and I didn't have an understanding of how it worked. And then one thing led to another. I started to work for the UN. I got a permanent position with the UN, which is a rare thing to have. It used to be my dream job. It was amazing. And there I kind of found myself trapped inside the heavy bureaucracy and hierarchy. And it felt very stifling. And it was hard to feel connected, to people on the planet that we were supposed to serve. And I felt very kind of trapped within this big, complicated system. And then thirdly, I went through a very difficult time in my life personally. And to make a long story short, I collapsed and I had to piece myself back together again.
Oh, wow.
And this is when my only way out was in. And I wouldn't be surprised if many of your listeners relate to that. So let that sink in a little bit.
Your only way out was in.
Yeah.
I like that.
Really, yeah, I really had to sit with myself, sit with pain, grow through pain, process things and deeply connect within myself. And this really transformed the way I thought about work, life, career, and what I wanted to do with life and how I showed up. So it's really defined my work since then. And I took this decision also in my late 20s to resign from my permanent position with the UN. It was a very hard decision because I was going into the unknown. Nobody said to me, Hrund, that's a great idea. Nobody. And I was sitting there on my last day in the Palais des Nations in Geneva, Switzerland, and I was having this imaginary conversation with Kofi Annan, and And I said to myself, I want to stay true to the ideals of the UN, making the world a better place. But what I will do from now is I want to honor the ideas that come up and persist. And I want to have the courage to show them, to show them through, to see them come to life. And since then, I've had more than 20 titles in my life.
Wow.
So my work has been around navigating different sectors, discipline, connecting dots, building a better view of the big picture, as well as focusing on the details. And the more I did that, the more I realized that's actually how we practice intuition, how we combine the different threads of our intelligence and cognitive facilities and emotional intelligence and all these different things.
And I'd love to get some of your actionable ideas on how our listeners, because now they're wanting to be able to tap into that superpower. I watched your TED Talk. You have a film, and we'll link everything in the show notes, as we always do. It's at jimkwik.com/notes. So I'll put a link to your TED Talk, to your film, to your book and your social media. You mentioned that most what we notice and pick up on with our physical and mental construct, if you will, is unconscious. But at the same time, our attention, I imagine a lot of our listeners can relate to this, is constantly being hijacked, right? So how would you recommend someone listening or watching, how do we take back ownership and agency of our attention so that we could tune more into our intuition?
I love that question. I love how you frame it. There is so much wisdom in how you frame it. So our attention is a scarce resource and has been for decades and probably always. The bottleneck of human thought, as someone said. But today, given the speed and the turbulence and, the smartphone culture and all these different things, our attention is under a lot of strain. And as you say, our attention is the key to intuition. What I want to tell people is that, one of the most important things that we do in order to gain ownership, again, to take ownership over our own attention and therefore our intuition, is to pay attention to what we pay attention to.
I love that.
So, we pay attention to so many things throughout the day, but do we pay attention to what we pay attention to?
It's kind of like this meta cognition, like this meta attention,
Absolutely.
Well, like meta learning is learning how to learn, or metacognition, thinking about your thinking, but paying attention to what you're paying attention to. I haven't heard it quite that way.
Yeah, exactly. So it's exactly that. And to document it. So what I recommend in my book is that people attention journal. So there's different ways of journaling. I honor all of them. But in this particular context, I would recommend that people keep an attention journal. So journal about what you pay attention to. You're capturing what you are anyway paying attention to, mostly unconsciously, but also do it like through your body. So for example, you get chills down your spine. You get goosebumps. Why? What is your skin telling you? You get a knot in your stomach. Why? What is your stomach trying to tell you? You feel warmth across your chest, a peaceful feeling. Why? What is that about? This is your whole system. Your body and mind is an ecosystem interacting with the world around you. And while this is mostly unconscious, it still shapes how we show up, perceive, think, and act, react. And so this is why it's so super important for us to really learn how to align with and train our intuition in order to be, first of all, connected with ourselves, because if we're not, it's very hard to connect with other people and the world around us. But also to gain, like you said, to regain ownership over our attention in order to trust in our own and confidence in our own intelligence and choices.
You mentioned you're having like roughly 20 different titles in your extensive business experience. We have a lot of entrepreneurs and executives who are listening. We do a lot of corporate training, around the world on mental fitness. I'm curious, how does intuition influence the long-term success? Because I know you coach and speak on the subject also. How have you seen intuition influence long-term success of a business or an individual? particularly when faced with uncertain conditions, right? The world is changing so rapidly. AI, I mean, it's kind of like the puck. It's like teleporting everywhere.
Yes, absolutely. This intuition is very key, especially as we navigate uncertainty. But it is also key for our personal journeys, whatever that may be. So for the listeners, also just to think about that, like, when was the last time you listened to your intuition? Where did you feel it? And what happened as a result? It's a very good kind of beginning to think about that. So as we navigate uncertainty, one of the ways to approach this is to think about one of the most effective ways, whether you look at martial arts or business strategy throughout history, is the power of presence. So when we are present we are filling up the space of our whole body and being in the moment, we are most able to harness what we know, most able to build on our experience and hone a well-harnessed intuition to take the best decisions. But also, and this I cover as well in my book, we become more prepared for the unexpected. Research shows that, when you are taking decisions when there is certainty, where there are known knowns, then statistics and analysis work best. But in uncertainty, a well-mastered, a well-honed intuition is super powerful and very important. It helps you synthesize many different data points and information, and you begin to recognize patterns, and you begin to trust in your own intuition. But when I say trust in your own intuition, what is really important here is building up that knowledge base. A question that I raised before, like knowing where you feel your intuition, knowing self-awareness, knowing yourself well enough to know when to trust it and when not. That's super important, because when you're in the middle of a crisis or a situation where you need to take that difficult decision, it's important to know how you consult with your intuition. So learning to develop a well-honed intuition takes practice and skill. But for the long-term success, like you mentioned, and sustainability, what I have found very useful is there is something about intention. When you have an intention about something, you have an intention about you want to move from a linear economy to a circular economy, or you want to change the business model, or you want to reach a certain market within 5 years or something. And then we have COVID, or we have, turbulence in any other form. Your intention remains the same, but intuition gives you flexibility to be fish in water, to be in that flow, to like, oh, I need to take a turn here. Oh, we might change this a little bit. Oh, let's go a little bit above. Let's go a little bit below the radar. There's different things that intuition gives us when it comes to opening up our sense of possibilities while remaining clear in our vision and intention. It enables us to be open to broadening horizons and seeing what's on the periphery. So we might spot new talent on the way because there's this amazing innovation or disruption in technology along the way. Or, there's all these different things. So being strongly aligned with your personal inner compass as a leader or entrepreneur, but also having this strong intention with your team, but creating a culture that hones and harnesses intuition equally as we do to other skills that we are much more familiar with in the workplace.
Yeah, I would say my business partner of almost 18 years, Alexis, she's been on the podcast. She's our CEO. She's very strong intuition. And I see it coming up every week. Well, she'll have this inspiration, and then I'll look into it, and it's actually backed by logic and fact. But sometimes, bridging that gap. And you mentioned the word develop. So this is actually, and when you said that, I actually got goosebumps talking about listening to our nervous system, our whole self. I call them truth bumps instead of goosebumps.
I love that.
But she, it's wonderful. You used the word develop, so it's not static and fixed, right? This is actually a tool, or maybe, because it's, I mean, how would you qualify? Is it just something you're born with? Is genius born, or can it also be built and developed? Like when people hear about the speed reading training we do or the memory training, some people don't realize that memory can be improved. A lot of people think it's fixed like their shoe size, but with proper training and discipline and practice, we can show measurable results. Does the same hold true for intuition? Is it a buildable skill or tool?
Absolutely. So first of all, we all have intuition, and it's up to us to train the muscle to hone and harness it. Intuition is developed over time. And so one of the ways to explain this is to say that how we immerse ourselves in the world. So if you imagine the world is a swimming pool and you jump in, you are immersing yourself in the world. You're sensing it with your whole body and senses and brain. And so what you take in is what your intuition is working with. And then there's lots of other different cognitive skills and emotional skills we use to discern what's what. That's another story. But yes, intuition is developed over time. And that's why, we sometimes talk about purpose. Purpose is very important. So sense of purpose. Purpose is very much linked to intuition. So your purpose in life can change over time. Do you see what I mean? I used to think purpose was a static thing when I was younger. But then I learned that it can change over time, depending on what your intuition is telling you and where it is guiding you as well. So what is so important also about this is like what we choose to expose ourselves to as whole beings, news, information, inspiration, any kind of stimuli. It is informing our system, our nervous system, our physical system, our emotional system, and informing our intuition, and our intuition shapes it. But maybe just to add one thing to that is, the way we learn, I think most of us maybe realize that we have very strong biases, and one of them is negativity bias, which means that we have to hear something positive, 30 or 70 times as much as one thing negative for it to affect us in the same way. But the other side of this is, for anyone listening who's gone through trauma, painful or difficult experience, they will know that experience deeply affected them. And so that is also something that has an impact on how our intuition gets developed. And the more that we are stuck in the trauma and the pain and it sits tight in our stomach, the harder it is to access a well-regulated nervous system and clarity of thought when it comes to intuition.
It's interesting when people are in that fight or flight or freeze. It's kind of like you're in your survival mode, and you're accessing your survival brain. You don't have easy access to your creativity, to your problem solving, to your executive functioning, maybe even to your intuition. You mentioned the attention journal, which is, I'm going to start that. So I encourage everyone to challenge everyone listening to do that also as well and do this with me. Are there other science-based techniques or rituals, routines, tools that can help boost and enhance our intuitive abilities?
Absolutely. So, the first thing, we've kind of said it, but I want to say it again. The very first thing we do in order to access our intuition is to train self-awareness, metacognition as well. And a way to do this is through journaling, attention journaling, stream of consciousness journaling, different types of journaling. What we also need to do is to train our ability to be in what I call the two rhythms, which is based on research, practice, and science. So the two rhythms are all about knowing when to switch between analysis and intuition. When is the time to let go and let things sink in, to sleep on it and visit it later? What we do know is that when we are imbalanced emotionally, we are super angry, we're anxious, or we've just totally fallen in love, that's not the best time to consult with your intuition, according to science. So that's another a cue for us to sleep on it and let it sink in. There are things like when we are under pressure, whether it's financial pressure, work pressure, personal pressure, that's not the best time either to consult with our intuition. And then it's good to know what to do then. And what we need to do in referring to the two rhythms is to create space for reflection, for presence. and to know not only to swing between intuition and analysis, but also being and doing. Being receptive, allowing the world to come to you without a plan, and then knowing when to implement and be deliberate. We need to balance these two. So it's not just about relaxing and acting. It's about really intentionally understanding why this is important. So we're keeping the circulation system of our souls and brains activated and going. And another way to also maybe think about this is by exploring the state of flow. When we are losing track of time, we are in a state of flow. And when we are in a state of flow, one of the things that happened is that our very critical mind, our doubter, our editor, has to step aside. We don't give that voice any space, and we're just doing. But when we are just doing, it's not just that. We are actually honing and harnessing all the capacities and knowledge and expertise that we have accumulated throughout our lives. And just thinking about it in a way that we are honoring that. We are giving space to that, and we are allowing intuition to bring to the surface the things that we want to see in front of us and to create with. So creating pockets of time like that. I sometimes advise people, take time for yourself. If you feel overloaded, overstimulated, you just can't add any more stuff to your tank, then I sometimes advise my coachees or students, just tell your loved ones and your colleagues that you have a meeting with me or somebody, and just go out alone and carve out that space for you to recharge your energy, to regulate your nervous system, in order to have a clarity of thought and a balanced mind to be able to tap into your intuition.
You could disconnect to reconnect.
Yeah.
And in your film, I'm curious, you explore how different cultures view and utilize intuition. Were there any differences or similarities that you have observed? Because I know your book is in many different languages, and our audience, we have people listening around the world. Have you noticed any striking differences or similarities as you observe, or patterns on how intuition is maybe perceived or even valued globally? Do you want to be able to remember confidently the information that you hear on this podcast? Do you want to improve your memory to easily and confidently be able to remember names and faces, client information, give a speech without notes, learn another language, remember what you read, and so much more? There's a solution, and I call it your Kwik Recall. In just 15 minutes a day, for 30 days, I've designed the ultimate course, how to unlock your Kwik Recall. Just go to kwikbrain.com/recall. Enter podcast 15 for your immediate discount as a thank you for listening to our show.
Yeah, that's a great question, Jim. And I kind of want to take an example of a wonderful person, Manidoma Somé. He's passed away since we spoke to him, but he comes from Burkina Faso in Africa, and the community of indigenous people called Dagara community. When I first met Manidoma Somé, he said to me, I'm on a mission to, heal the relationship between the West and us. And he said, my culture is spiritually rich, but economically poor. And the Western culture is spiritually poor, but economically rich. That was his terminology. And what he shared with me, and this is very common in different cultures in the world, which we may not be that familiar with, is that many cultures don't divide consciousness into consciousness and sub or unconsciousness. It's all the same. And when he said to me, I'd love to be in your film, thank you for bringing up the conversation around intuition. I just realized that in my Dagara community, we don't even have a word for intuition.
Wow.
Because it's like the air we breathe. But he said, the closest that I can think of for intuition is the spirit world. So there's rituals and practices in the Dagara community, according to him. The rituals are to connect with nature and to ground oneself. The rituals are also to seek answers to something that is hard to navigate. And that is what they call the spiritual. But we can also think about it like community and harnessing that. And another thing that he said, which I think is is a very good reflection for me and probably many others, is that he said, there's in the West, you talk a lot about how hard it is to navigate uncertainty. But in my community, that's the beauty of life. Every day is uncertain and it makes it so exciting. And there's just discoveries and unexpected things that happen. If things were always like predetermined and known, we would find it so boring to be alive. So there are all these different things. But I would say that some cultures are in deep relationship with the natural world, the living world. While some cultures, like communities, don't see grass, like green grass, they see concrete.
Mm-hmm.
And they are engaging more with machines than humans or living beings. And that also defines, I think, our relationship with ourselves and intuition.
In your journey with Insaei, has there been anything surprising or maybe unexpected about human nature that you've encountered? Anything that stands out in your research and just living with this, this insight?
There's so many things. There's so many things. So maybe just to share two things that have recently kind of come together for me in my mind. So I've been thinking about this and working around this for over 20 years. But only recently, it just kind of came to me very clearly that when we talk about intuition in all these different strands of thought, from well-being to intuition being the key ingredient for Nobel laureates to reach their greatest discoveries, literally. The realization that the intuition that keeps us in tune with ourselves, in sync with ourselves, and for us to be able to relate to other people and be well, is the same intuition that enables us to make the greatest discoveries.
Mm.
So the human genius is to some extent based on intuition, and it's the same intuition that we hone and harness to keep ourselves well. I think that's one thing that I think is very that takes that's mind-boggling for lots of hats, and it was for me too. Another thing that I was told recently by my colleague and friend, the neuroscientist, Dr. Rebecca Granger-Ellis. She said, we had this misconception about the brain. The brain is not first and foremost to think. The first and foremost role of the brain is to keep our body going, to make sure that we take one step after another, that our heart is beating and we can breathe and stuff. So when we are under a lot of stress, like we are, most of us in the world today, stress and anxiety and depression is the leading cause of disability and illness in the world today. It's a serious thing. And when we are under a lot of stress, first of all, we co-regulate as a species. So we co-regulate stress as we do a calm and regulated state.
Mm-hmm.
And also, we can't really tap, like you said earlier, Jim, we can't really tap into the genius, the creativity, the empathy, the broad horizons, making connections, the super thinking part of our brain, if it's just too strained to keep ourselves taking one step after another.
Looking forward, how do you envision the concept of intuition in Insaei evolving or maybe even applied to new areas like education, business, personal development? As you kind of look at the horizon, how do you see that evolving or being integrated or applied?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what I'm about to say both explains what I see on the horizon, but I'm already seeing it too, which is really good. So when it comes to CEO leadership, we're talking about the inner journey. The biggest consultancy agencies use that language today, which means that it's getting more and more into the mainstream. We also have practices like the education program I trained, but also a group of researchers in Europe that I met with this week that are building, how do we put this into education? Mm-hmm. The more we build into education, the space to reflect, connect within, and to regulate your system, to know how your brain works, to know how your nervous system works with the brain, our ability to read into our senses and really understand that how we experience the world is stuff to think with, And this is happening more and more. There's even in the States a program called Mind Up, which I believe Goldie Hawn leads as well, and Daniel Siegelman and others, which is about training kids and how to regulate their brain and system. And I think we can do more of it there. I think one of the things that we can do and you also mentioned management. So when it comes to intuition, and in order to navigate uncertainty, the skill to come up with valuable insights, the skill to understand what's on the periphery and what is emerging absolutely comes with sensing and intuition. So the more we build that skill into our system, the better off we definitely are. And, given the technology we have today in AI and we have so much knowledge that is easy to access, our ability to synthesize this knowledge, make sense out of it, and use it to make life better and the world a better place to live in. That is the challenge that we're faced with. And so training intuition and sensing and the practice of applying it to our research and application and how we come up with ideas is something that I see us doing much more of.
Yeah. Well, I love it because you offer people real hope and real help in this area. I'm a big fan of Goldie Hawn and Mind Up. We've been talking about different ways we could collaborate, but it's nice to see that, that they're inspiring individuals that are helping people redraw the borders and boundaries of possibility. Our show, I like to ask our guests, because out of personal curiosity, is really focused on learning, right? And I'm just curious, outside of this subject of intuition, Insaei, what are you personally curious about now, currently? Like, what's on your to learn list? Is there something that you're putting research or study or just personal time into understanding better?
Yeah, thank you for asking this. So I'll share with you what I want to find more empirical evidence, practice-based knowledge, scientific knowledge around is the value of us as humans to discover things and to use our intuition ourselves. And this comes from the world of AI. When people are talking about maybe AI will one day have intuition equal to human intuition, all these different thoughts, and just this interest that we have as humans to seek something that lies external to us. Well, I have this belief, which I want to test, and that's why I mentioned all these research I'd like to find. And if anyone listening can direct me, I'd love to hear that. I think I have this belief that there is this alchemy involved when we apply spirit to matter. When we apply our hearts to our heads, when we create things with our hands, when we try something personally. Neuroscience teaches us that the way to learn is to do stuff. It's not just to listen and put it here above the eyebrows,
Mm-hmm.
It's to do stuff and apply it and test it, trial and error, experience, live it. And I want to know more about kind of how, I want to understand better how intuition is why it's so important for the human spirit and our well-being and our joy and creative capacity to do stuff ourselves.
Yeah, I would love at another time you and I to talk about intuition and learning and how they share space or complement each other, are part of each other. Where can people connect with you if they want to go deeper in your work? How would you recommend they do that? Because I'm sure after this conversation, there's some people, you mentioned, it's interesting how powerful people could be as they access more of their head, their heart, and their hands. Right? It's something I talk about limitless H cubed when those things are aligned. How can people learn more about you or connect with you?
Yeah, thank you. So I would recommend reading my book or listening to my book, which is coming out in May in the States. And so if you search Insaei Hrund, then you will always find me. I'm the only one with my full name in the world. So Hrund Gunnsteinsdottir, it sounds very far off, but I'm the only one, so it's okay. I will also be offering online courses in training people to align with and train their intuition through the lens of Insaei, which will be super inspiring, I hope, and good for everyone participating. I also write newsletters. I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn. You can find my talks as well online.
Perfect.
Yeah. Send me a line. Communicate, engage with, and tell me your thoughts about intuition and insight and examples of how it works for you.
I love it. Yeah, if people want to take a screenshot of this wherever they're consuming it, and when you post it, tag both of us and share how intuition has impacted your life. I would love to see that. I'll repost a few just because you tag us and we get to see it. And I want to thank you so much for your time and your talent in coming on our show.
Thank you so much, Jim, and likewise. I'm honored to be here.
All right, everyone. I want to thank you, everyone, for tuning in. As always, you could find more ways to fuel your limitless potential on our YouTube channel. You could join 1.8 million subscribers. Make sure you subscribe. We also post the extended version. If you're listening to this on audio, we limit it to 20 minutes because it's quick, right? Quick brain, and your time is valuable. But I encourage you to go over to YouTube where we have the extended version, which is much more robust. And make sure you hit the subscribe button, leave a comment under the episode. I'm a very, very fast reader. I read every single comment. And so I want to thank everyone for being on this journey with us to realize and reveal our fullest potential. This is your brain coach, Jim Kwik. Until next time, be limitless.